Hello, my AP Econ students. We've got a sad moment here. This is worksheet number 23. If you haven't figured it out, this is our last worksheet. I can't tell you how much it breaks my heart not to be able to go around to each and every one of your desks and see you today and talk to you and go over it and make fun of how badly you did and tell you that that's interesting because I've never seen it before and all these fun things that I get to do. Unfortunately, we got to do it this way, but it's what it is. But it's been a wonderful ride with you guys. Again, I'm hoping to see you back here sooner than later, but at any rate, our last worksheet, let's run through it. So this one is all about currency exchange. Now, if you notice, what I asked you to do for each one is draw both graphs, both the graph for the dollar and the graph for the other currency. And again, you're never going to be asked to do this on an actual AP test or exam or question, but I want you to see it from both perspectives because they can ask you from both ways. And I want to make sure you can process it. So I know it's a little bit cumbersome to have to ask you to do it that way, but again, it's going to be beneficial for you. So what I've got on here, I've drawn kind of the base graph for each, and I'll run through that as we go through, and then I'm going to show you the shift. And so the first scenario here, number one, is says Japan's cars get significantly better reviews across the board than American cars. And again, you always want to ask the question, where do people want to buy or where do people want to invest? Okay, that's where demand for currency is going to go up. And then if they don't want to buy in a particular country, demand for that currency is going to go down. Okay, or you can also look at it from the supply side, and I'll show you that in a second. So here's the dollar market on the left. And again, remember we have supply of dollars. I made this nice and big. Hopefully you can see it good. But you got supply of dollars, demand for dollars, quantity of dollars, and again, this is the important axis here, yen per $1. It's the dollar market, so that's the one that goes second. Remember, we're measuring the value of the dollar in terms of yen. So how many yen does it take to get $1? So again, two ways you can look at this. Whichever one makes more sense to you, supply or demand. So one way of looking at it would be to say, well, if we're going to buy a lot of Japanese cars, we have to send a lot of our dollars out into the world because we're buying things from other countries. If you look at it from that perspective, you can say that's going to increase the supply of dollars, okay? And you draw your lines, of course. All right, so that's one option. Or you could look at it this way. If Japan's cars are better than our cars, they're probably not buying our cars. If they're not buying our cars, they don't need our dollars, and so that's going to decrease the demand for the dollar. Now, either way, you look at that, okay, you're going to see that the same thing is going to happen. It now takes fewer yen to get $1. So again, whichever you're more comfortable with. If it makes more sense to think about it from the supply perspective, that we're supplying more dollars to the world, or if it makes more sense to think about it from the demand perspective, okay? Excuse me while I nix that. All right, my fault on that. So anyway, that's from the dollar perspective. Let's look at it from the yen perspective. So again, two ways you can look at it. One way would be, the way that makes more sense to me, would be to think of it as, okay, so we're wanting to buy Japanese cars. To buy Japanese cars, we need their currency, or yen. So that's going to increase the demand for yen. Okay, and we could look at it that way. Again, you can also look at it as a decrease in supply of yen. If their cars are better, they're not buying our cars. If they're not buying our cars, they're not sending their currency into the world, and you could decrease the supply of yen. But whether you increase the demand for yen or decrease the supply of yen, either way, it's going to take more dollars to get a yen. Okay? Now let's look at it from the dollar perspective. Has the dollar appreciated or depreciated? Well, if it takes fewer yen to get $1, again, just think of it, if it took fewer yen to get a baseball card, you would say, well, my baseball card's not as valuable. Well, here it takes fewer yen to get $1, so the dollar is not as valuable, so the dollar has depreciated, okay? All right, and if you're looking at it from the perspective of imports and exports, okay, so this is now thinking long-term, okay, so long-term here. If the dollar has depreciated, it's going to start making our stuff cheaper, right? It takes fewer yen to get $1. It's going to take fewer yen to buy our things. Our stuff has just become cheaper. Japan's going to begin to buy more of our stuff. And so long run, it's going to make our exports increase. Okay, our exports to Japan are going to increase. And think about it from this perspective, it takes more dollars to get a yen. Okay? If it takes more dollars to get a yen, Japan's stuff is going to start to become more expensive to us. We're not going to buy as much, and so imports are going to decrease. And again, this is that balancing act that I've told you about, where we get freaked out. Oh my gosh, we're buying all these Japanese things. What's going to happen? Well, either they're going to turn around and reinvest that money back in America, and the money makes its way back that way, or because of the change in currency, it makes our stuff cheaper, and so they're going to start buying more of our stuff. Okay. Either way, we're going to see exports to Japan increase and imports from Japan decrease. Okay. Again, we're going to go through this for each one, so hopefully if it's not making sense, by the end it will make sense. All right. So a second shifter, we talked about changes in real income. And so real income in the United States decreases compared to Mexico. Okay, so in other words, Americans are not making as much money. Okay, so we're going to look at it from the perspective of the dollar here. Okay, again, key ingredient, pesos per $1. Just like when we talk about the peso market, now it's dollars per 1 peso. Whatever market it is what comes second. Okay, so from the perspective of the dollar, okay, if we don't have as much money, we can't buy as many goods from Mexico. Okay, so one of two things is going to happen. Either, again, what makes more sense to me is that the supply of the dollar is going to decrease. Okay, the supply of the dollar is going to decrease because if we're not buying their things, we're not sending them dollars. And as you can see, it's now going to take more pesos to get a dollar. Or you could also look at it from the perspective and say, okay, comparatively, our income has gone down. That means comparatively, their income has gone up. They are going to be buying more American goods. And if they're buying more American goods, it increases the demand for the dollar because you need more dollars to buy our goods. And either way, again, it takes more pesos to get a dollar. That's the key ingredient right there. From the perspective of the peso market, okay, if we don't have money and we're not buying goods from Mexico, we're not going to have as much demand for pesos, okay? And so if we're not demanding pesos, we're going to see either a decrease in the demand for pesos. Okay, you could do it that way, and now it takes fewer dollars to get a peso, all right? Or you can look at it from the perspective of if they are buying more of our stuff comparatively because their income has gone up, that's going to increase the supply of pesos because if they're buying our stuff, they're putting more pesos in the world. Either way, you're going to see the effect here, and how did I ask it? As the US dollar. So here, it takes more pesos to get a dollar. That means the dollar has appreciated, okay? And that should make sense because here the dollar has appreciated. In this market, it now takes fewer dollars to get a peso. That means the peso has depreciated. Remember, whatever one currency does, the other currency has to do the exact opposite. So here, the dollar, sorry, I was going to write depreciated, the dollar appreciated. Okay, the dollar is more valuable, and again, think of it in terms of that baseball card, okay? It takes more pesos to get a dollar. If it took more pesos to get your baseball card, woohoo, my baseball card's worth more money, okay? In this case, the dollar's worth more money. And then, if it takes more pesos to get a dollar, our stuff becomes more expensive. If it takes fewer dollars to get a peso, Mexico's stuff becomes cheaper, and so what's going to happen in the long run is imports to America are going to decrease. I'm sorry, take that back. Imports are going to increase because their stuff is cheaper, and exports to Mexico are going to decrease because our stuff is more expensive. Okay, again, that's a long run scenario where you start to see the effect on balance of trade. Okay. All right, let's look on the back here. Here, the inflation rate in the U.S. is less than the inflation rate in Russia. And again, we're asking the question, where do you want to buy? Well, if our inflation is less, that means our prices are cheaper. Okay? If prices of American goods are cheaper, that's where people want to buy. So, from the perspective of the dollar, there's either going to be fewer dollars in the world. Okay, you could look at it that way in the sense that, well, if we're not buying goods from Russia, we're not supplying as many of our dollars, so supply of dollars decreases. Or what makes more sense to me, American goods are cheaper. More countries like Russia want to buy American goods, and that's going to cause the demand for the dollar to increase because you need more dollars to buy our goods. And so again, we're talking about rubles per dollar on this axis, just like this is the dollar market, or sorry, this is the ruble market, so it's dollars per ruble. Okay, this this is the dollar market here, so it takes more rubles to get a dollar. From the perspective of the ruble, remember, people don't want to buy stuff from Russia. They do want to buy things from America, so you're either going to see a decrease in the demand for rubles. Okay, we don't want to buy Russian things. They have higher inflation than we do. Their prices are higher. Or, because they are buying our things, you're going to see an increase in the supply of rubles. Either way, again, you'll notice it causes the ruble to depreciate because it takes fewer dollars to get a ruble. So the dollar has appreciated, like the last one, and the ruble has depreciated. Okay? And then, of course, like last time, if the dollar appreciates, if it takes more rubles to get a dollar, eventually our stuff will become more expensive. Okay? Russian things, on the other hand, are going to become cheaper. So imports from Russia are going to increase because their stuff is cheaper. It takes fewer dollars to get a ruble. Okay, we buy their things. Exports to Russia are going to decrease because our stuff just became more expensive. Okay, so imports increase, exports decrease. All right, and then the last scenario, remember the fourth shifter has to do with interest rates. And again, from this perspective, we always look at it from the perspective of the investor, someone who is lending their money in order to get a return. Well, if that's the case, you always want to go where interest rates are higher. That means you give up your money and you're going to get a greater return on that money. So wherever interest rates are higher. Well, here it says real interest rates in the U.S. are less than real interest rates in England. That makes England an attractive place to put your money because you're getting a greater return on that, okay? So you can look at it one of two ways. Again, we're talking about the dollar market here, so it's pounds per dollar. That's important, all right? If we want to buy investments from England and put our money in England, that's either going to increase the supply of the dollar in the world, okay, because now to buy their stuff, we have to provide them with more of our dollars in order to buy their stuff, and so either the supply increases or investors don't want to put their money in America, and so that would decrease the demand for our dollar because they don't want our investments. If they don't want our investments, they don't need our currency. And so that's now, it takes fewer pounds to get a dollar. Okay, in the pound market, okay, just looking at it from both perspectives, we do want to buy investments in England, so it's going to either increase the demand for pounds. Okay, it either increases the demand for pounds because we need their currency to buy their investments, or if they're not buying our investments, they're not sending their pounds out into the world, and so the supply of pounds decreases. Either way, again, you see, here's the key, it takes more dollars to get 1 pound. So in this case, the dollar has depreciated, and you see that the pound has appreciated. Okay, now, that being the case, of course, if the dollar has depreciated and the pound has appreciated, so now it takes more dollars to get a pound, well, we're not going to buy as many of their goods if it takes more dollars to get a pound because pounds have become more expensive, so imports decrease. On the other hand, our stuff just became cheaper, so they're going to start buying more of our stuff, so that's going to cause exports to England to increase because our stuff just got cheaper. All right, and then lastly, real quick, just as a follow-up, because again, you may be asked this question here. Let me reduce this real quick so we can see the whole question. Okay. Assume the central bank of the U.S. institutes expansionary monetary policy to stabilize the economy after a recession. Okay, that's kind of what's happening right now, right? So basically, what's going to happen, you can look at this a couple of ways. The Fed is going to pump money into the economy. Now, what do we know about what happens when the Fed pumps money into the economy? Well, when they pump money in the economy, what happens to interest rates? Interest rates go down. So interest rates go down. Now, this is a very similar circumstance to what just happened up here. Okay, a moment ago, notice what was the scenario, if you can read that. Real interest rates in the U.S. are less. In other words, real interest rates have gone down. What happened when real interest rates went down? People don't want to put their money in America. That decreases the demand for the dollar, and it causes the dollar to depreciate. It's the same thing that just happened. Okay, same thing. Fed puts money in the economy, probably buying bonds, right? Open market operations. That causes interest rates to go down, and that's going to cause the dollar to depreciate because now people do not want to put their money in America. Now, in a general sense, you can think of it as the Fed has put more money in the economy, and so the value of money is decreased. Of course, this is really talking about international exchange, so you have to connect it to something that would fluctuate the actual currency. So we say that they're not going to invest in America, they don't need our dollars, that causes the dollar to depreciate, and then like we said a moment ago, exports to Europe are going to increase, okay, because if the dollar depreciates, that makes our stuff cheaper, and so they're going to start buying more of it, and it causes exports to increase. Again, I know that's a lot, that's a mouthful, okay, and we're looking at it from different perspectives. I'm just giving you as much practice as possible. Again, at the end of the day, you always want to ask yourself the question, whatever scenario they give you doesn't matter. You want to ask yourself the question, where do people want to buy or invest? If the scenario causes more people to want to buy or invest in a particular country, the demand for that currency is going to increase. Or you could also say the supply of that currency is going to decrease because they want to keep their money at home. Or if you don't want to buy or you don't want to invest in a particular country, and that's what happened right here with this last little scenario, if you don't want to buy or invest in a particular country, that causes the demand for their currency to decrease. You could also say the supply of their currency is going to increase because they want to invest in other places. And then you just look at the graph and you figure out the appreciation and depreciation. So there you go. As always, if you have any questions, give me a shout. I'd love to help you out. I'm going to copy this and or save this and send it to you as a document so you can kind of see the chart with all the right answers and what it should look like. But of course, if you have any questions, let me know. You know, I'd be happy to help. Till next time.